Thanks for joining in this. Oh, thanks, Lisa, for recording it. Thanks for joining this informational webinar on our Idaho request for collaborators. This is run by the Northwest Climate Resilience Collaborative and funded by NOAA. My name is Zach Thill. I'm the Program Integration Specialist for the NCRC. We are hosted by the Climate Impacts Group at the University of Washington. And so today in the webinar, we're going to go over some background information on the Resilience Collaborative, and then we'll move on and provide an overview of the request for collaborators, or the RFC, and then we'll finish with a Q&A session. And we'll collect all the questions and post them on the webpage in the coming days. So if we can't answer your question now, check back on that webpage and we should have the answers for you there. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to Jason Vogel, who will take the next slide.
I had to unmute myself. Forgive me there. Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Vogel. I'm the interim director of the Climate Impacts Group and the director of the Northwest Climate Resilience Collaborative. I'm just going to provide a really quick intro on this slide, but I'm going to stick around for questions because I think your questions are the more important part of why we're here. And you probably were able to gather a fair bit just by looking on our website. But what I got on this slide here is a map of the area that the region that we're serving. So that includes Washington State and Oregon State, as well as Idaho. But you can see we've got blue dots for our sort of academic partners in this exercise and green dots for our non-academic partners. They're either community-based organizations or nonprofits. And the idea behind the Northwest Climate Resilience Collaborative has been to sort of experiment with a climate services organization, trying to move beyond sort of conventional academic leadership in these sorts of efforts and trying to center the needs, the expressed needs of frontline communities in the work that we do, the kinds of questions that we're asking, the kind of outputs that we produce. And hence we tried to find thoughtfully, like seek out community partners and nonprofits that sort of community facing to really dig in and understand those perspectives better. Um, the We are centered administratively here at the University of Washington, but you can see from this map that we currently don't have anybody in Idaho. We were partnering with Idaho State University for a while, and that uh, has ended. So we've got some Idaho proximate partners with Wazoo and Gonzaga, but we'd really like to find some folks in Idaho that are interested in pursuing this kind of work and see if we can establish a good working relationship together. There's a lot more to say. We've got these three dots at the bottom of our categories of work. Those are sort of undergoing a lot of thought around what we mean by each of those, but we definitely have a lot of work going on with coastal tribes, probably less relevant in Idaho, but there's other tribal work going on in Idaho as well. Rural resilience, but we're also doing some urban and suburban resilience work as well with communities that are less well resourced than say the Seattles and Portlands of the world. And then of course scaling is this idea of uh, helping and working directly with communities in need, but also to the extent that it's acceptable to those communities, drawing lessons from those projects and then spreading them sort of horizontally out to similar communities that can use those lessons learned to improve their own outcomes, and also sometimes vertically to state or national level decision makers that might make decisions around funding priorities or how they execute on grant programs and what kind of criteria they have. So that's a snapshot of the NCRC. There's a lot more to talk about, but I'll hold off on anything else unless folks have questions. I believe I'm passing it back to Zach. You look muted there, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Lisa, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So we are accepting applications for a team of Idaho-based collaborators to join our program of work. And we hope to advance community-centered climate resilience projects that promote climate justice. And as Jason mentioned, the NCRC is a 5-year program of work, which is particularly interested in forging relationships that support tribes, nonprofits, or community organizations that are focused on improving community-based resilience in climate and environmental hazards. So we are open to conventional action-oriented or co-produced research, as well as unconventional work, such as citizen science, indigenous science, and storytelling. And so we intend to identify one team in Idaho to generate a program of work, and that could evolve over time and potentially include multiple projects. Okay, next slide, please. So on the screen there, we have a few different team options, and I'm not going to read through all these, but just note that there is not one option that's preferable, and you'll note that option 5, we lay out that these are not the only options on the table. We're open to other compositions, and you can find these on the website for reference. All right, next slide, please. So the objectives of the request for collaborators and a priority for this program is to advance frontline community priorities in relation to climate resilience. And we recognize that these priorities may look different from priorities often outlined by decision makers or resource managers or academic researchers. And so we seek a team that's interested in creating both on-the-ground impact and actionable science, but also scaling that out. So the team should work to generate regional impact and advance local and regional climate resilience and adaptation. This means that the team should not only affect on-the-ground change, but also build regional resilience and adaptation, for example, by influencing rules or regulations or policies. And we also recognize that this kind of work takes time, and it can take a lot of time to move a project forward, develop effective working relationships, and execute on a project. And so it's reasonable for applicants to focus on that dissemination and scaling out part of their work later on the second half of their program of work. Right, next slide, please. So funding levels and application. So we are providing $40,000 for each year of work. Our year starts September 1 and runs through August 30th. So we hope to award the team this fall. And so each year will be $40,000 or up to $40,000. To apply, you should visit the RFC webpage. There at the bottom there's an application packet and a budget template with instructions on how to apply. Fill those out and you submit those to that email, which is also on the webpage. And the due date for all this is November 1st. All right. And with that, we're going to move on to question and answer time. So you can put your questions in the chat or you can raise your hand and we can collect the questions and try to answer them. There's a big chance that we won't be able to answer it fully at this moment. And as I mentioned, we'll put that on the webpage and you can find the questions hopefully by the end of the week.
So you can either drop your questions in the chat or feel free to raise your hand, press the raise hand function. Either works. And make sure that you're unmuted. Yeah, Jonna. Is that how you pronounce your name?
It is, thanks.
Yeah, Jonna, go ahead.
Hi, great, thank you. I'm just sitting in for someone else who couldn't be here, but I'm just wondering if you have worked with any tribes in Idaho so far, either through your group, either through this specific project or through a different project. I work for the Nez Perce tribe, and I'm not the point of contact for this, but that person couldn't be here, so I thought I would join. And I don't have any questions, so I guess that would be my only question.
That's a great question. The Climate Impacts Group as a whole has worked tribes in Idaho off and on over a 30-year history, and I don't know that whole history because I haven't been here for that entire 30 years. Just within the NCRC, we currently are working through Gonzaga University that has a relationship with the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and they're pursuing an extreme heat and smoke project where they're both setting up a monitoring system, but also I think the monitoring system is on some of the nation-owned buildings, but also providing like do-it-yourself fan filters to tribal members. So that was a project that's come through. And Zach, you're probably better positioned to speak about. I think a couple of the community grants were also awarded to Idaho-based tribal organizations or tribal nations, perhaps.
Yeah, we had a small grants program that was launched a little over a year ago, and we had two awards go out to Greater Hells Canyon Council that works kind of at the borderlands of Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And then another organization we funded was Upper Snake River Tribes Foundation, and they engage with and work with a number of tribes, and some of those tribes are located in Idaho. So those are the most direct, immediate tribal organizations that we've worked with the small grants program.
Okay, great. I appreciate you all adding more. The person who's on vacation probably knows all this. But yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jonah. And then Marzetta, you asked a question. We are a small government agency. What would our role be, and what kind of work are we looking at? Thanks for that question, Marzetta.
Should I take this one, Zach, or would you like to?
Why don't you go and I can chime in?
Okay. Um, yeah, but I sort of have a couple of responses to your question. My first one is, we're sort of, this is like a pretty open-ended solicitation. We don't want to constrain the good ideas people may have by structuring, what your role should be. But my other response is that we are hoping that the majority of the funding that goes through this award would be directed to frontline communities themselves. So that's generally not, funding a government agency, with the exception of, I think, tribal governments, which have a sort of a special status. Um, but that might look like I could see a local government that's also working with a community-based organization and ensuring that they are receiving some of the funds. But what you're doing with that funding is kind of an open-ended question that's you're better suited to answer, I think, than we are. What are the needs in the community? What kinds of issues are being expressed at the local level around, concerns that are maybe climate related? They may not be expressing them in terms of climate, um, but they may have a connection to climate. So I'm thinking, in particular, concerns that I've heard around, being exposed to smoke or extreme heat or flooding. These are all issues that have a climate connection, even if the way that local communities are expressing them tend to come across as like my house is flooded, or I can't get to work because the roads are flooded, or I work outside and I'm choking on the smoke, and that's not good for my health, or I'm concerned about my children's health. We want to make sure that we can play a translation function, I guess, for folks who are expressing those sort of climate relevant issues, while recognizing sort of the reality of how they frame the issues themselves. Zach, maybe I'd pass it to you for, I'm sure you have a different perspective on this.
Thanks. I think you did a great job of covering a lot of it. I think I would, just re-emphasize the point that we are really trying to rethink the dynamics between um, organizations. And so I think this is an opportunity for community-based groups and governments and others, such as academic researchers, to come together and think through solutions to some of these challenges. And again, I don't think I'm really in a place to define what that specific challenge is, but really thinking more about like who's at the table. And with these funds, I think we're hoping that this is an opportunity to engage and reach out to organizations and communities that maybe historically or typically aren't at the conversation or aren't at the decision-making table.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Rosetta? Um, if not, I'll pass it off back to Zach and Jason. I think we've come to the end of our questions for now. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Marzetta.
Hi, this is Jonna. I'm sorry, I can't find the hand again.
Okay.
Um,
Go for it.
okay, I have a follow-up question. It's and I've read through again. I'm not the lead on this, but I read through the RFC. Excuse me. And so, if I understand you correctly, there does need to be a research component. Um, I, I mean, because I hear your part about a translational function too. So does there have to be some kind of data collected? I mean, in terms of the wildfire smoke example, it's clear that indoor air is worse during wildfire smoke. So getting a tool or just fixing that seems like a reasonable way to use this amount of funding. So just a thought, just a question on that on what's required.
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit and then Jason, please add. I don't think that it's a requirement. I think what we're trying to do is, honestly a little challenging where we want to like provide funding to do some actionable on the ground kinds of work around climate resilience. So, for example, one of the projects is providing air filters to communities, indoor air filters, which is really important during smoke season. But the other component is sharing that work out so that the work is not only impacting one community, so that we can amplify the work. So the objective of the NCRC or the broader goals of the uh, climate adaptations program are to build regional resilience. And to do that, it needs to be both locally based work, but also amplifying that. And so that's why we're trying to develop or promote some kind of teamwork where there's actionable on the ground work, but there's also folks that are sharing that work out with other similar communities or decision makers or policymakers.
Okay, great. Thanks. I appreciate the additional details.
Jonna, this is Jason. I might just add, um, yeah, that's a tough one to answer because, I think all of our hearts are in the right place. Like we want to help people out in the world, but we are receiving money from NOAA under a research line item, which suggests that it does need to be at some level producing knowledge that can be shared beyond the community that's receiving the funds and implementing solutions. But I think that could be pretty creative. That could look like maybe just reaching out to the Coeur d'Alene tribe or Gonzaga University to see what they're doing in regards to the smoke issue and whether it's like something that could be replicated in other communities. I know that Zach has been working with a nonprofit Cafe Wenatchee in Eastern Washington that's working with um, Latina uh, communities on similar smoke exposure issues, and people in sort of substandard housing or mobile homes that don't have, quite the same ability to filter their air. So, you might be able to look at some of the existing partnerships, but it also may have more to do with a compelling need that you've already identified and you want to execute on, and then maybe you're partnering with one of us or with an Idaho-based institution to kind of tell the story, to kind of just maybe do a case study that allows people to learn from what you're doing over the course of 2 years to avoid some of the pitfalls of the challenges that you end up facing implementing it, or perhaps, just sing the praises of the successes and provide that example to similar communities that might also want to implement similar programs.
Okay, great. I guess, sorry, I'm that person. Oh goodness. Hopefully this is helpful to others. I know it's NOAA and I'm just wondering if a qualitative type survey to whatever would be, that is a type of information gathering, not maybe data in terms of from a monitor, but um, yeah, that's my question.
Yeah,
Survey tools.
well, absolutely. And the folks that we're working with at NOAA are extremely open-minded about what they consider to be responsive to the NOAA research mission. So some of the other work that we're conducting right now revolves around oral histories and storytelling, capturing local knowledge in a form that's actually usable by the communities themselves in different ways, and sometimes in most circumstances the communities themselves own that information and sort of have the ability to say yes or no. We do or don't want it to be shared outside of our own community. It might be more of a historical archive, but it might also be something that's available to for educational purposes within, for example, in a tribal school system, or there's other, I think, very open possibilities for what that information sharing could look like.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions that are coming up for anyone? Seems like no at this point. So maybe I'll hand it to Jason and Zach, carry it forward.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I think we can call it good. And if you do have a question later on in the process, you can reach out to that email address and shoot us a question, and we will be responsive there.
And I would just add that if based on this conversation you're thinking you've got a good idea, but maybe you need some help getting it over the finish line, or you need some partnerships to deliver on that work, you should feel free to reach out about those ideas as well. I think we can perform a bit of a matchmaker function to see if there's some of those examples I was talking about where you might want to talk to other people participating in the NCRC, and perhaps model off some of their ideas. Anything like that that strikes you as potentially useful, just reach out and ask those questions, and we'll make connections that make sense and see if we can find a good project and all the ideas that may be floating around in your heads. Well, thanks everybody. Sounds like we're at a close.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.